Okay. So what we're going to do is we've got a little under an hour, I would say, and what we're going to do is we're going to have you take about 15 minutes or so to talk about your proposal. We have a few questions for you. You can ask us some questions. We'll try to wrap things up, and then we'll check. We'll talk to references, and we should be able to get back to you by next Monday, I hope. But we may have to do our next full board meeting is next Tuesday, so we may not have a final decision until after that.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So I'm going to say with that, I'm going to let you guys take the floor, and it looks like we're seeing. You're sharing a screen with us, and we can see that. Great.
Okay, so you can see a picture of your port area.
Yep.
Okay, good. Okay, so let's get started. So this is our team. I'm Jerry Waters. I'm a associate principal here and a designer and planner with 22 years experience. I also want to mention that Tom Robbins will be the principal in charge, and he is unavailable today because he is on the Salmon River. And then we also have John Van Staveren with Pacific Habitat, who is a consultant that we have, and then there's other consultants that you probably saw in the proposal. He specifically has chimed in about the habitat and whatnot, and whether we would need to use him for this planning exercise, and he said he'd probably end up just having to write a memo, at least at the planning stage. And then we have Monica Anderson with BHE.
Hi, I'm Monica Anderson. I'm a civil engineer and principal with BHE Group. We have offices in Portland and Eugene. I have over 30 years of experience with site development, both master planning and design for projects throughout the state of Oregon, primarily for public agencies. We typically focus on earthwork, stormwater management, utilities, and assist with site circulation design. And we're currently working with YGH on the OSU MSI project, having done master planning and design on that project. So I'll turn it over to Marilee.
Great. So good morning. My name is Marilee Hanks. I am a principal landscape architect, and I own a small firm here in Portland. We're about 14 people, and we offer services in the area of landscape architecture, experiential graphic design, which is basically signage and wayfinding, interpretive graphics, and we also offer ecological analysis services. So we do a lot of work with GIS for our clients, analyzing planning areas. And I have 20 years of experience working on projects that range from public and private. I've worked with YGH for the last 15 years on dozens of projects. Largely, I would say the most significant in terms of kind of the relevance to your project is the planning work that I've done with YGH in analyzing U.S. Department of State properties, where we do a lot of master planning to determine how projects, complicated programs fit on a site. So a variety of studies that involve circulation, essentially, and visitor experience.
Okay, so we'll look at some relevant experience. Again, YGH is a probably 54-year-old firm now, and about 25 years ago, we actually did the Embarcadero Hotel in Newport, in the marina area there. So we have marine experience. We have tourist sort of destination experience, which includes Mount Hood Meadows. These are both sort of extreme climates and environments. We actually, about 2 years ago, we're also working in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, which is also a marine, but also a high wind-driven sand that requires some real diligence in detailing, which I think is also applicable to your site location. We also deal a lot with buildings that require multiple stakeholders and mixed use. This is a PSU's Student Rec Center, but it also had the Department of Social Welfare. It has this city's archives in it. It also has mixed-use retail and lease space on the ground floor, and it also had the state office for the chancellor of the state university system. So there were a lot of stakeholders that we had to accommodate in this building. We also are very sustainable. We have currently just about ready to break ground a net zero housing project that also has ground floor retail. And then we also do a lot of food service, particularly in the culinary arts. We've done, I think, 3 or 4 culinary schools. The most recent one was Clark College over in Vancouver that just opened this past fall for them. So we do have that experience also. One thing about our team, and I think somewhat unique to our office, is we like to have the continuity of the team and the people working on your project, from the initial brainstorming and planning and program verification all the way to construction and closeout of construction. We keep the same people on the team for continuity of project and understanding the goals and values of the project, but also for client, just that client relationship building. And we really enjoy a very involved client process. We like to meet with our clients because they know their project better than anyone, and so meeting with them frequently and in person is the best way to deliver a quality project. So we don't shy away from including you in the process and having those meetings. And something that also is, I think, really important to your project, again, is the information and the visitor information that will connect the port back to the city of Port Orford, and Marilee has done some really great work in that regard.
So this is a project that we worked with Puget Sound Energy on. So it was a component of a permitting effort for them for their ongoing operations at Snoqualmie Falls. And I thought that this was a project that we should just mention. I thought it had some interesting relevance for your project in terms of their goals for meeting the kind of interpretive component and improving a visitor's experience to this incredible natural resource that also has a working component. So one of the things that we worked with our client and various stakeholders on was telling that story of the river and telling the story of PSE there and the ongoing operation. So as you can see with the image on the right, this was a small visitors plaza. We're really looking to have kind of an engaging experience for families when they would visit, and we're really wanting to bring that authenticity with an interpretive component for PSE, so components of their large turbines. What you can see here, which I think is really fun, is that this is not, a high-end, expensive element, but it's really elegant in its authenticity, and that's something that we really like to work with our clients on, is pulling out the relevant kind of story and telling that in a way that really fits with the place. This is another project that I led as a project manager and designer on. So we were working with the city of Bellevue. The city is really pretty competitive with Seattle, as you probably are familiar. So this project was on Lake Washington, and we were tasked with helping them sort of craft their image. They wanted to move towards being identified more as a waterfront city. So the challenge that they gave us was to work with sort of developing a master plan for a series of properties that had been purchased over about 20 years that were a variety of single-family homes, and we were to look at how this complicated topography, a sort of selective removal of existing buildings could all be crafted in a way that would really make people feel like they were more connected to their waterfront. So downtown, if you see the big green block on this, that's actually the Bellevue's downtown park. Their downtown core is just north of that. So they had this challenge of being a little bit remote from their waterfront and also a great degree of grade separation. So there were over 100 feet here that we were navigating in grade change. And so the image on the right is a rendering that we prepared as part of a public process that, you know, it was much more extensive than what you're looking for in terms of the master plan, but I thought it was interesting just in terms of talking about stakeholders and a variety of people who are involved. But one of the things that we managed to help the city with was to develop public spaces that were up at that top level, easily accessed from downtown, that brought people out kind of closer in a perch to look out over at the water. So this is basically a view that did not exist for them before, and it's something that was really going to bring people closer to the water. Also, tucking program, how to make that space that you do have on complicated hillsides more sort of flexible for development.
Another relevant project that we've had the opportunity to work on was Molongo, Angola, which was a port for Chevron. It included a jetty extension and port facility for them to then stage, and we master planned sort of the service yards and the staging of shipping materials out to offshore oil drilling rigs and whatnot. And this is the same. We had to selectively take down some projects or buildings. We had to renovate some buildings, and then we had to plan new ones, and all the circulation of the workers, the port workers, and then just the people that live there and work there, because it has a component of permanent residence that was also part of the project. And we also, here you see, we had to take inventory of what they have and how they use it and how the port operations work, and then incorporate that obviously then into the master plan and sort of try to improve their port operations. And here you can see some of that planning effort and locating, again, the buildings, the laydown areas, and the circulation of vehicles, both, again, the port service vehicles and just regular through transportation. And a little closer to home, recently we've been working for the last 2.5 years with Oregon State University in Newport. We did the master plan on the Hatfield Marine Science campus there, and not only did we do the master plan, but it was nice to do a master plan and then roll right into an immediate sort of first phase of implementing the master plan, which included the Marine Studies Initiative building, which is now broke ground, and if you go up there, you can see the equipment. Deep soil mixing is just started taking place this week. So here on that campus, there's also, again, multiple stakeholders. There's the EPA, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, NOAA, and then, of course, OSU. And they all actually work and research together collaboratively, which the new building will actually even accommodate more so. So we did a master plan exercise looking at, again, the circulation, the utilities, the seawater loop, and then took and analyzed where the best place for this building would be, but not only for this building, but what's the 10-year or the 20-year plan, where's the next OSU building going to go, and where is possibly other agencies' buildings going to go. So this plan shows that sort of the immediate site planning, but also that future site planning and new roads, infrastructure. And the interesting thing, or the nice thing I think about this plan was you see most of the campus and the research is on the east side of the plan or the right side, and then the public will come in sort of on the west side. There's also the marina further on there and everything. And so the buildings actually will be that mixing chamber and sort of that separation between the public and the researchers, and it allows that to happen. And when we're doing our master plan, too, we also like to not just work in plan, but also do these sort of experiential vignettes that show sort of the character of space that we're trying to create, outdoor space, and the link between outdoor and indoor space, and that public space versus, the more private research space. And so these are some of the vignettes we used when doing the master plan and thinking about what was going to happen. And then you can also see they have their dock. OSU has their own dock. They have their ocean-going vessel, and they have essentially a port operations building and a staging and shipping, because their vessel goes out for about 4 months at a time.
Could we ask one question on that project before you leave it?
Absolutely.
The ramp that is utilized for the tsunami escape, I believe, is steeper than 1 in 12, which would be the building code requirement for both ADA and not to exceed 1 in 12. How did you get approval to do something that is clearly not in compliance with the ADA and with the building code?
Right. So a vertical evacuation structure, which is what OSU required this building to be, a vertical evacuation structure by FEMA does not have to meet ADA requirements. So it is a vertical evacuation facility, but it is not ADA compliant. And if you actually use the horizontal evacuation, which if you just go over to the west a little bit more to Safe Haven Hill, likewise, Safe Haven Hill is a evacuation site, and it does not meet an ADA requirement either. So the trick is to post. We have once the building is complete, we'll have to post and make it clear that it is not ADA compliant. But we did provide elevators that are designed to withstand the 9.0 earthquake in order to then be a vertical accessibility for those that need assistance to get to the top of the building for that vertical evacuation. So it is provided, but you're correct, the ramp is not.
Not permitted and not built yet either.
Okay. Let's not go in the weeds on that particular question. It's a whole other project.
It's illustrative.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just kind of being a time taskmaster here and making sure that we get through what you guys do, and then we have time for our questions.
Okay.
So, don't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Monica, you wanted to say something?
Just to add in on the master planning work for the OSU campus here, we also looked at stormwater management. This is a fairly large site with a lot of impervious area and with very few, if any, stormwater management treatment facilities. Future development on the site might trigger permitting requirements or permits through DEQ, Corps of Engineers, NOAA fisheries requirements that would then require stormwater treatment. But other development on the site might just fall under city building permit and city code, which has no treatment requirements in Newport. And so we wanted to make sure that this site would be more environmentally responsible. So the master plan includes recommendations for the inclusion of higher levels of stormwater treatment than is required by code. Your code, in fact, in Port Orford is actually a more stringent code than Newport has and does require stormwater treatment. So I thought that was a very nice statement about environmental responsibility.
Great, thank you.
On the OSU project, the university, really wanted the new Marine Studies building to be a demonstration project of sort of a high level of responsibility for building in marine and sort of ocean front property, I guess, if you will. And so they required this building to, again, meet the 9.0 to be able to survive a 9.0 earthquake, and then also be a tsunami evacuation site for a double XL tsunami. So that included a lot more engineering and a lot more studies. So we actually hired a guy who works for Dr. Way, who works for NOAA and the University of Washington, and he actually did site-specific tsunami modeling for the precise site that the building is going to be built on. So this just shows some of that tsunami modeling, and it shows you sort of the speed and the maximum depth of water inundation that will happen on Newport at a probabilistic 25-year event. Along with that, then, because there's the marina and the port there, we also had to look at debris that would impact the building in an event and be able to withstand that. So this is a debris model that he did. And that resulted to then the engineering. So the engineering of this building is quite substantial. We have a 100-foot deep soil mixing foundation that creates this mat that allows the building, should it settle in an event, would be uniform and not split the building in half. And then the superstructure of the building itself is a what they call a progressive collapse design. So it can take a debris hit where some of the columns or some of the beams are taken out, but the frame, the design of the frame will still maintain itself and still stand up and be a resilient structure. So these are some pretty high-level requirements that the university had, and we're excited that this is going to really be a demonstration of some pretty responsible, resilient design and planning. And then on top of it, obviously, the university wanted an iconic building that was also intuitive in its use. So the ramp actually then comes up over the top of some portions of the building and then ultimately onto the top of the lab portion of the building and to a height that is above a XXL tsunami inundation, but is also an icon and a really powerful building that will represent OSU in this effort. So we're excited. Like I said, the Deep Soil Foundation started this week, and it's going to be an exciting project. So your project, we got to cruise right along here?
Yeah, keep cruising.
So your project is an exciting project, also obviously a high dock situation in a marine environment with all the operations of a port. It's a unique port. It's the only dolly port on the West Coast, and it's kind of got some single access. I want to talk real quick about the schedule. I know you had a 2-month schedule in your RFQ that you issued. I'm not sure how stringent that 2 months is. We can do it in 2 months, but if to do a better job, it extends longer than 2 months, we're more than happy to do that also. And then the other thing is in-person meetings. As I mentioned before, we really like to work with our clients. We think that's important to getting the best job done, so we're more than happy to be down in Port Orford more than once. In fact, 2 or 3 times would be I think more applicable. And then obviously there's a big part of program verification, I think, at the beginning. I think that's really important because master planning will be impacted by the program verification, and according to a lot of different papers we've read, you have a lot of different wish lists, and I think that's very exciting, but it also kind of needs to be vetted. So to your site, obviously you know your site. This shows it at a sort of normal water level. You have the gray representing sort of your impervious paved area on the dock, and then the red is sort of your existing building conditions. And Monica's done a little bit more research. I'll let her talk a little bit about kind of what she sees there.
As a team, we haven't had a lot of time to get too deeply into the research, but we have been able to review your website, materials on your website, such as your strategic plan, your facility master plan. Our geotechnical engineer on the team has done some research, and we've looked at some local news, done our own investigative work. So out of that and what you had put together in the request for proposal, we know that soils are a concern. There are predominantly 3 soil types across the site. In your large flat area, the major part of your site, you have rock. So there's some real benefits if we're in any sand. There will be some other types of concerns for foundations, liquefaction issues. Drainage is a concern for you. There's hillside drainage as mentioned. There's clearly the storm overwash issue. Maybe some other drainage issues that we'll need to be looking at. Environmental, there are certainly, there's potential of a little wetland due to ongoing drainage issues. There are some endangered species that were noted. All of those things are elements that we need to look at and review. We know that there's some potential danger from some small landslides sloughing off of the bluffs that might present a danger. We'll need to be reviewing that as well. And these are all things that are not dissimilar to what we did at the MSI project. Certainly the specifics are different, but there are always soil issues, there's drainage issues, and environmental issues that we need to work through on any project. In addition, we know you have a very constrained site, constrained by topography, constrained by its location, access. You have a lot of uses on the site, so you have a lot of competing traffic patterns, both vehicles and pedestrians. There's some limitations. So it's a lot of nice challenges to be looking at and trying to solve. And you have some issues relative to protection from the elements such as wind.
Yeah, so real quick here, we've mapped sort of your record storm back in 2014, which obviously overwashed the high dock. I think the good news is if you look at the finished floor elevations of your existing buildings, they're actually only about 15 inches below that record storm. So I think with some relative ease in design, you could probably get most of new buildings up out of the high stormwater level. Can you still see us?
Yep. Yes. And just want to make note that I believe we have a call-in user right now that's showing up, and I believe that's Annie. Annie, are you there?
Yes, I am. I'm driving the spotlight.
Okay. Just want to let everyone know, and also let you know that we've been joined by Commissioner Scafo. I don't know if you see him on the camera or not. But
no, we can't.
Hello.
He also just joined us, so.
Okay, great.
Go ahead. I'm just doing a time check. We're at 9 o'clock, so proceed.
Yes, we'll try to finish up here quickly. And then here we've mapped the Dogami mapping of double XL tsunami inundation, which obviously shows that your location under a double XL tsunami would have a substantial amount of inundation. The other thing to note is that you're actually more susceptible to an earthquake than Newport in your area, which I didn't know until we spoke with our geotechnical. And then here the hatched area, I think, shows primarily the planning locations that we're going to be looking at in this master plan, which includes everything on the high dock and then also the access road. And then up on 5th Street. And then here we're showing without much knowledge, obviously, of where probably the building planning will take place. It's got the building up on 5th and Washington that is mentioned to provide a multi-use function. And then sort of the redo of the cannery building and other adventure tourism, fish market, other retail, and port offices down on the dock. And here, just initially, and thinking about what we did at OSU, it seems like the buildings here could provide a really great opportunity, again, for sort of separating the public from the port operation and the longshoremen by keeping most of the public, say, on the eastern side, and then with port operations being on the west. But that would be fleshed out in the exercise of the master plan. And then here again, just overlaying that inundation. And what I think is promising in this is you can see that I think there's an easy way to plan a horizontal evacuation similar to Newport that in a relative ease would get you out, get a safe area of refuge out of the inundation zone and not maybe require the resiliency of building construction that OSU required. So I think that's a very promising thing right off the bat. And so planning for success, here, this is actually the public side or the opposite side of the OSU building that you're seeing in the rendering there. But really to us, your project goals seem to be really to have that site utilization, and improvement in circulation and port operations, and then really plan the successful sort of iconic destination place of a port that contains, commercial and retail seafood, also engages the research community that's there, and then, again, provides that revenue-generating tourism destination. So we'll end our presentation there and, I guess, start questions.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. I'm particularly intrigued by this last slide. I think is a great place to sort of jump off from. And I want to circle over here to some questions that we kind of looked at previously. Sorry, I'm just manipulating our information here a little bit. And I think that we've heard a little bit from you on this first question about what makes this an interesting project to you all. So I don't want to get too much into that, but I guess if you have anything to add there, but what I'd like to hear from you guys is what you see as sort of the biggest challenge of this project. And then we've got maybe 3 or 4 other questions, and there may be a few others from other commissioners, but I'd like to just kick it off there with that question about what you think is sort of, based on what you've seen so far, what do you think is the biggest challenge for this project?
Well, I think it's twofold. I think it's you've got a beautiful site, and that high dock is such a unique sort of physical feature, and your operations are such a unique feature of the West Coast. So I think it's a double-edged sword that it's such a unique feature that I think you can really, with this master plan and development, really capitalize on. But at the same time, again, because of its sort of remoteness, its single-point access, the fact that it is obviously a working dock, but you also want to create tourism and get people down there, that there is this sort of safety and circulation issues that need real, thoughtful and delicate consideration. But the uniqueness and the power and beauty of the site is what I think makes it so great, and then if it's planned and done well, it, I think, will draw people, and that's very exciting. And the multiple stakeholders is exciting. I know it adds complexity to a project, but we're really used to working with multiple stakeholders, including the city. I think the idea that this port needs to reconnect and be a part of Port Orford is also, I think, a really great challenge, but would make, when it's done and done correctly and pulled off, will just make the whole town a better place, and that's very exciting.
Well, I was going to say maybe moving, I tend to think that the site challenges are things that can be solved, and we often look at those as exciting opportunities. So one thing that maybe hasn't been mentioned yet that I think is worth talking a little bit about is that when we reviewed your strategic plan, now that was back from 2007, but some of the highlights there were the challenge with funding and sort of the fiscal responsibility, the financial operations. So that's something that in our mind feels like, really a nut there. So it's driving the business, such an important business aspect, the operations here, tied to the livelihood of the town. So I would imagine that there's quite a lot at stake in terms of determining what program elements are coming in and how you're going to balance these. So that, and that's not maybe something that we've been able to find in all of the research that we did that was easily available online, but something that we would certainly love to hear more about.
Yeah, and I would like to add to that we actually helped OSU with some of their fundraising efforts for the MSI building also. So it's also something we're not afraid to engage.
I'd like to ask, do you ever do any follow-up studies on the financial success of the projects that you've completed?
That's a good question. I don't think I could say that we've done some, really crunched any numbers on them. And so many of our projects they're multi-use and multi-stakeholder, but they're also often contain that educational component. And so in that regard, they're usually viable because of the educational sort of, again, that component is backed by a pretty substantial institution.
Probably not. I mean, it seems to me that a specialty consultant would, that's not typical for an A&E, but it's something that I've certainly worked on projects where additional consultants were brought in to study.
Right.
But not part of our regular design efforts.
Right.
Yeah, this is Annie. I think that's a separate kind of programming issue for the commission to be working on with other consultants.
Well, I've been involved. Annie, I've been involved with other building projects, and that's one of the things that particular company did was follow up on the financial success of their program.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a good strategy.
Yeah, and that's part of where I said, that program verification up front is really important.
Exactly.
Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, good morning. Sorry I'm late. Welcome to Orford. I just wanted to see, maybe elaborate on how YGH sees the deliverables. What products we actually going to end up with?
So usually in these master planning efforts, you end up with a master planning document, which is really like a book almost. They're usually somewhere 100 pages or whatever, depending on the complexity and all the aspects that we look at. But it breaks everything down as far as site utilities, drainage, then obviously the placement of buildings, their square footage, their height, public access, private access, new roadways, wayfinding. I mean, it documents all these things in a very succinct way. And then also phases. I think that's an important thing when you're talking about this, is it'll break it down into phases. You'll probably have a 5-year, a 10-year, a 20 or 25-year phasing that shows those phases that will be developed and what will be developed in each of those phases, so that you can incrementally, obviously, sort of take on the project, because it's obviously not something that you can just do overnight. And when we work through all the requirements and all the things that you want to see in the master planning document is one of the things we work with you on to make sure that the document provides that roadmap for the successful implementation.
Well, I might add also that along with the narrative description, so you describe kind of the categories, but we also work to provide plan diagrams,
right.
And imagery. Sometimes we'll pull out precedent imagery. Sometimes we'll do three-dimensional kind of studies in SketchUp to begin to show, how this, especially when we have a complicated, site geographically with grade,
yep.
We'll make sure that we integrate some type of visualization to understand.
Yeah, much like those OSU images we showed.
That question of Sam's leads right into a comment and question. We promised ourselves a fresh de novo look at the entire port property, which is not just those shaded areas that you showed on the site plan. It also includes the cliff and the bluff and Fifth and Harbor, all the property. The property alongside Dock Road coming down is subject to sloughing. So there's lots of discussions that we need to have to really take a good fresh view. That brown on your slide there, that is not the only potential footprint for buildings. So
sure.
Don't be thinking that that's the answer, because it may very well not be.
Absolutely, and sometimes I even hesitate of showing a diagram like this, because we don't have enough information to plan this out. So absolutely, this was just a conversation piece, and by no means a representation of an actual project or the limits of the project. That's something we definitely need. That would be sit down and work through with you.
Right.
One more. Just doing a time check. We're going to be aiming to wrap by 9:30, so 20 minutes and go there.
Yeah, I was just wanted to ask if you're familiar with the Crew Clay conceptual proposal, and ask you, is that's not something are you planning on touching that as far as dimensions and I know you're going to look at the site, but is there anything, how's that going to like blend into your work?
So we are aware of that effort, and we definitely reference that or use it as again as a source of information. But I really think this effort is best if we kind of start anew and really look at the big picture, and then as we kind of hone in on aspects and elements of specific buildings or uses, that might become more relevant. But I really think this is kind of in my opinion, a clean start effort.
So, go ahead, Annie.
Oh, I was going to say that was on our list of questions. It appears that you have quite a lot of other work that has been done on the site, and we were curious about the status of some of those planning documents and how you envision this particular effort sort of feathering with or putting some stuff aside. Like it's hard to get all the background by just reading the final documents without understanding what the dialogue is there at the port and how satisfied you are with the direction that was set and what should be taken forward and how this feathers in.
And this is all part of the process that as we initiate the process and move through it, it's that discovery of what is important to you, what resonates, what's valid, what no longer is. All of these elements.
May I address some of this?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I came into this project about 6 months ago now and was originally charged with trying to figure out funding for construction. What became clear was that some of the projects that you have seen in the earlier documents have in them many pieces of the kinds of things that people are interested in, but none of the scenarios that you have seen was either fundable for construction in terms of state and federal grant support, nor did it appear that any of them would actually be able to generate the income needed. So in terms of some of the ideas of, at a program level from some of those earlier documents, many of those are still very much alive. But as someone just said, this is in terms of where anything goes on the site or how the site is used or what proportions are dedicated to what, we are very much at a clean slate because the real bottom line of this project is the bottom line. The port needs to be able to generate enough money to support its operations and build a maintenance reserve. So that's kind of the driver of the whole thing, and the entire site is at issue.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I can imagine. And those seem to take a very specific thought in mind and sort of not a complete comprehensive view. So that's good to hear because that was my intuition.
Okay, and I think that's going to be the subject of more discussion depending on what path, how we go forward. There's a few other things that we wanted to touch on. You've already touched on, but for those who weren't here to hear it, you already, I believe, answered the question about the project lead and who would be our sort of primary contact. Could you just reiterate that so everybody has heard it?
Right. So I would be the primary lead for master planning and design here at YGH. Tom Robbins would be the partner in charge and sort of the project manager. And then I would also work very closely with both people that you see sitting here. Marilee has a lot of planning experience and offers that sort of landscape and wayfinding that is really important and helpful, and just a lot of experience. And we've worked on State Department projects and whatnot. And then obviously Monica offers the technical sort of that civil side of again, stormwater, utilities, traffic and grading and all that stuff, and all that comes into play when you're talking about a project like this. So as a team, we work very closely together, and then obviously engage you as often and as frequently as needed to really get out, again, get the effort and the document and the vision that you want.
In that regard, on the bottom of page 3 and quite a bit of page 4 on your proposal, you put time commitments to the project, with Tom Robbins being 20%, you, Jerry, at 40, Irene at 20, and then you go into your subs, and Engineer Brain added those up, and it was 135%, so that's a great start.
Yes. Exactly.
We like that math.
And
those questions are always interesting to answer. Yeah.
And those percentages are
of an individual person.
Are given, and our commitment, say, in a week or a month, because we also, obviously, we have other projects. So we're saying, like myself, I would commit, say, 40% or, at least 20 hours a week working directly on your project.
You said that you...
Probably instances where it would be higher than that, because it never takes into account overtime.
You said you'd be down here 2 to 3 times. Would there be open meetings, open to the public, where the public's invited, to hear what you have to say, or you to hear what they have to say? That kind of thing?
Absolutely. That's very much a part of our process. We had at least 2, if not 3, public meetings up in Newport when doing the MSI building. And when you're talking about a public building, a public planning process, this is your town. This is your livelihood. It's important to get all the comments. Not everybody will always be on the same wavelength, but that's okay. Hearing the opposition sometimes is very good, because there's good ideas there. But I think it's important in the process. And it's important then that people like to feel that even if they're a little bit opposed or they have a different idea, that they're being heard, and that it builds consensus. In general, it does.
Just for a little context, there have been a series of public workshops over the last 8 years, including a city visioning process and then a strategic planning process that the port itself led. So I'm not saying not to have any more public input, but I think there is a lot of information available from the public, and we have been working hard to make sure the public is apprised. So we are not looking at starting from scratch in that respect at all.
Yeah.
Okay,
that's good.
That's good.
That helps.
So I'm going to do my duty here and, again, do a little time check. We've got about 10 minutes or so to wrap things up. There were a couple questions that touch on the things you're talking about now that I want to touch on. In terms of, I'm going to sort of ask, this is a 2-part question. This is you could argue it might be a smaller project than what you typically do, and again, a remote site. So can you say a little bit about how you think about the strategies you'll use to work with us in terms of our being a remote site, and sort of how much attention we can expect to receive from your firm?
So again,
I'm put you on the spot.
That's okay. That's okay. I think the remoteness of your site is the beauty of it. I've worked in the Steens Mountains. We've worked in Africa. So working in a remote place doesn't detract us. I think once we have a task and a job to do, we put 100% into it. And the key is, again, I think being there. And we can get there. That's not a problem. And getting the information and also realizing the beauty of the site and understanding the uniqueness of it. And then we just kind of go full bore at it.
I would maybe add that while we maybe showcased some of our bigger projects because those things are kind of exciting and people like to hear about them, our firms together work on a huge range of projects, small to large, and at least from my philosophy, I give my client, regardless of the size of their project, 100% of our effort and focus. So if you work with us, you're getting all of our expertise. You're not just getting some small percentage because it's a smaller project. We don't work that way. So we're really dedicated to our small projects as much as we are to our big projects because the success, we're sort of in this, our success is tied to your success here. So we want, we're in this as deep as you are when we're a consultant.
And I would echo that and also make the point that the expertise that you are seeing here at the table is the expertise that will be working on the project, no matter what the size, because it's important to all of us to have a successful project, and that comes out of dedicating the experienced people and the expertise that we all have in our offices for our various disciplines and bringing that together. So, again, the size of a project is not an issue. And frankly, this project looks just really exciting and fun because there are some real differences on it as well. And so,
this is
just one little specific info. Monday, this week, Terry Richards, our city manager, had a presentation by Christine Shirley from the state emergency services people, and she presented a new FEMA map that shows, as long as that site plan is up there, although I don't agree with it, it shows much of that brown area is now subject to what the FEMA calls the V-zone inundation. That's not tsunami. That is just normal winter flooding type thing. So there's some current information that just came out. Yeah, that's a better slide. It shows the existing purple, the existing building being very much inundated by what FEMA now believes is normal wintertime storm activity. I have the map in the car. I should have brought it in, but it's brand new information. And of course, you know about the significantly changing maps for the tsunami inundation that Ian Madden and George Priest have presented. The adopted one statewide is the late 90s map for tsunami inundation, but there's a new one on its way that is much more, it's either much more extreme or more conservative, depending on your point of view.
Dave, you could just give that information to me. I'll scan it and forward it to him.
So I just did again, I'm going to get, don't do it right now, Dave.
Yeah, you don't need to do it now.
We're going to have to wrap here. One final question, if you could, just in a couple of minutes, talk about if there's any additional information about the project that you would be most anxious to gather as critical to moving forward. And again, just if you have, just give us a couple of minutes if you could.
Well, I guess two things for me. One would be, and I guess they're sort of inextricably tied, one is, again, the program verification, because that's so important as far as how much you want to put on this site, and that's inextricably tied to sort of the financial structure and how is this project going to be realized.
I would say from my perspective, I would love to have a better understanding of the decision-making process and how many people are going to be involved. And when we start out a project like this, it's really great if we can map out the process and understand in terms of the approval. The timeline that was published is pretty tight, and I think the hardest thing with those kinds of timelines is the approval. And it's not us getting the design work done because we can work late nights, but it's harder when we have a complicated decision-making process.
Yeah, understood. I think all of those are really good points, and we're
very aware of those challenges ourselves, and we're going to be having to work on tackling those. And I appreciate that you are also aware and appreciative of the importance of resolving those questions. Any last few minutes here? Any other final questions? Obviously, we may want to be circling back with you at some point, but right now we're sort of stuck with the timeline that we've set up. Thank you for sort of walking us through this and taking the time to answer some questions from us. Steve, do you have anything you want to add? Anybody else?
You don't have blueberry muffins like these in Portland, I'll tell you.
I know.
Road trip.
That's really why we're advocating for more visits.
Yeah.
Gary? Okay, well, again, thank you very much. As I mentioned, we are right now doing these interviews. We'll be discussing these, and then we'll have probably a recommendation to the full commission meeting that will happen next Tuesday. And realistically, speaking of decision making, I think that would probably be realistically when we'll actually have a decision. So if you don't hear from us on Monday, don't be stopped for Tuesday. But we'll try to get back to you as soon as we have an answer. And if we have any other questions, certainly we'll be following up with you. And likewise, if you have something that comes to your mind right after this, reach out to Steve, and he'll share that with us.
And when you see that FEMA map, look at what they call the V zone. I've worked with FEMA maps on rivers for decades, but I haven't worked with FEMA maps on the ocean issues. So it's new stuff, and it's quite different than what I anticipated.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for inviting us and including this on your list for this project. Because I think it's very exciting, and it would be a great opportunity. We're really looking forward to it. And just out of curiosity, how many interviews are you doing?
2.
2. Okay, I like our chances.
All right. Well,
and you said that Tom is running the salmon? Is that what you said?
He is. He is rafting the Middle Fork of the Salmon River this week. So sorry he couldn't be here, but he's doing his own water experiments.
All right. Well, on that note, I'm going to sign off. Out of respect for other folks that we've scheduled for this time, love to chat with you more, and we will get back to you guys.
All
right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you again.
Here, have a good day.
Okay.
Oh, where is your kid? I'm such an idiot. Thank you. I have concern. Listen, wait a minute. Sorry, that's so.